43 years ago, the Unitarian Universalist Association imagined a world without hate. 43 years ago, we imagined a world in which homosexuals and bisexuals could live without discrimination. That first General Assembly resolution passed in 1970, urging the UUA to work to end discrimination against homosexuals and bisexuals by urging all peoples immediately to bring an end to all discrimination against homosexuals, homosexuality, bisexuals, and bisexuality, with specific immediate attention to the following issues. A person's sexual orientation or practice shall not be a factor in the granting or renewing of federal security clearance visas and the granting of citizenship or employment, and calls upon the UUA and its member churches, fellowships, and organizations immediately to end all discrimination against homosexuals in employment practices, expending special effort to assist homosexuals to find employment in our midst, consistent with their abilities and desires. That was our first resolution, the first time we spoke as an association to end discrimination, 43 years ago. But we didn't stop there. In 1973, we voted to create the Office on Gay Concerns, or the Office on Gay Affairs, which was a rather interesting title at the time. There have been many jokes made about that title. It became Concerns later. 1987, we passed a business resolution, and I'm quoting the Reverend Dr. William F. Schultz. We Unitarian Universalists have been the religious leaders in the area of gay and lesbian rights, in our establishment of a denominational office, in our support of minister who performs services of Holy Union, but at the moment our values and principles are being sorely tested, not just by prejudice from outside our doors, but from homophobia from within. Let me put it as directly as I can. Far too many of our congregations are choosing not to call or even consider gay or lesbian ministers solely on the basis of their affectional orientation. When we hear questions like these posed about gay or lesbian candidates, but will she talk about anything other than homosexuality? But will we become a gay church? But will he be able to counsel heterosexuals? Will the community accept her? When we hear questions like these, we know we are in the grip of a profound terror. Now, I do not want to be self-righteous here. The fear of same-sex love runs deep in Western culture, but I beg us to understand that if such fear is permitted to control us, we will be in violation of everything which Unitarian Universalist stands for in the world. It is not enough to say passively and self-contentedly, why, of course, gays and lesbians are welcome in our congregations if they choose to come. What is required is the recognition that gay and lesbian people are already members of every single congregation on this continent. The issue of whether they feel supported enough to make their presence known. What we require is the courage and wisdom to acknowledge our own fears, both gay and straight, and to take active steps to make the welcome known to the gay and lesbian community. Since that time, we have continued to make progress. Let me just see a show of hands. How many of you have a gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender minister? Look around. Just look around. Keep your hands up. Just look around. And I will put my hand up there too. My minister at First UU Richmond is a lesbian. We have opened our minds and and opened our hearts in many, many ways. But it has been a journey, and it continues to be a journey. At that point, in 1989, when we heard the words from Dr. Schultz, there was a survey done and a report to the General Assembly. And that survey was done to ask people's opinions, Unitarian Universalist opinions about gay and lesbian people. And whether or not we should affirm them, whether or not they should be ministers, whether or not, and I thought this was interesting, you would like to know more of them. How do you answer that question on a scale from 1 to 5? Oh, I know enough already? Or, no, I don't want to know anymore. It's kind of like, those no-way questions. But it was there. And in that survey, it was found that 15% of gay men and 34% of lesbians said that the UUA fails to affirm them. Another 28% of gay men and lesbians said they experienced limited acceptance within the UUA. And 41% of bisexuals said they felt similarly. 52% of lesbians said that the UUA goals relative to GLB concerns or persons are clear, but they are not shared by individual congregations. And in response to the question, I would have a difficult time voting for an openly gay, lesbian, or bisexual ministerial candidate for my congregation. UUs were split. There were large groups strongly agreeing and large groups strongly disagreeing, but slightly more disagreed. I would have a difficult time. At that point, we didn't know where we would be 20 years later, just like today we don't know where we'll be 20 years from now. All we can do is imagine. All we can do is cast a vision large enough. Cast a vision large enough to make a difference in the future. In 1993, we passed a resolution of immediate witness to support the Employment Non-Discrimination Act in 1994. In 1996, we passed a resolution to support the right to marry for same-sex couples. In 2004, we stood against the Federal Marriage Amendment, what we know now as the Defense of Marriage Act. In 2007, we passed a responsive resolution confronting gender identity discrimination and repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In 2007, we passed a resolution of immediate witness and action of immediate witness to pass the Employment Non-Discrimination Act with transgender inclusion and protection. In 2008, we opposed the Florida and California marriage protection initiatives. It was in that same year, 2008, that the Standing on the Side of Love campaign was formed. How many of you have a Standing on the Side of Love campaign shirt or hat or pin or something? The Standing on the Side of Love campaign was formed to seek to harness love's power to stop oppression. This faith-based public advocacy campaign works to counter exclusion, oppression, or violence based on identity, including sexual orientation, gender identity, immigration status, race, and religion. The vision for the Standing on the Side of Love campaign happened by the Reverend Bill Singford on the front lawn of Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist congregation. The front lawn with TV cameras from all over the world, there to interview the congregational president after a man walked into the sanctuary, pulled out a gun, and started shooting on a Sunday morning. In the letter he left in his truck, he blamed liberals, and particularly those who supported things like gay rights. The Tennessee Valley congregation stood on the side of love in ways that I will never imagine could be topped. They immediately said, no matter what, we welcome all people. No matter what, our doors are open to you. When I was there for the memorial service for Greg McHenry, one of the people who was killed, I was greeting people coming in to the sanctuary, and there was this young couple and their 2 children, about 8 and 9-year-old children, and I welcomed them as we were doing and said, are you a member here of the congregation? And she said, no, we've never been here before. But we wanted our children to know what love looked like. And we know that this place is about love. Love will guide us. Love takes us in places that even our wildest imaginations cannot truly envision. And yet, I think love gets a bad rap. We've all had it, you know, where it didn't work out so well. We've had those moments, at least, where we thought, what am I doing, and why am I doing this? And yet, we also know that it is in those other moments, when a parent loves a child, when a child loves a parent, when an elderly grandparent is dying, when a mom or a dad is diagnosed with cancer or Alzheimer's or something else that takes them from us, we know what it's like to love and to feel that sense that there's nothing else in the world more important than to be here at this moment. And so, love became the basis of the work that we do around our commitment to lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. In 2004, Massachusetts was the first state to pass same-sex marriage. We had civil unions before, but Massachusetts was the first state to pass same-sex unions. And the case in Massachusetts, Goodrich versus the Department of Public Health, Hillary Goodrich and her spouse, Julie, Unitarian Universalist, and their wedding occurred at 25 Beacon Street with the Reverend Bill Sinkford presiding. And that began a path of involvement and commitment that took us to Connecticut in 2008, in Iowa in 2009, in Vermont in 2009, in New Hampshire in 2010, in New York in 2011, and Maine, Washington, and Maryland in 2012, Rhode Island in 2013, and let's not forget the District of Columbia. And nor can we forget 3 Native American tribes: the Coquille Indian tribe, the Suquamish tribe, and the Little Traverse Bay bands of Ottawa Indians, who have made same-sex marriage part of who they are. And we also can't forget Argentina and Belgium, and Canada and Denmark and France and Iceland and Netherlands and New Zealand and Norway and Portugal and South Africa and Spain and Sweden and Uruguay. And same-sex marriages are legal in certain states in Brazil and Mexico. The world is changing. And Unitarian Universalists have been, without taking too much credit, we have been at the forefront of this work. We certainly haven't done it all. We haven't done even a fraction of all the work there was to do. But we have been there, we have marched, we have made phone calls, we have talked to people, we have raised our signs and our banners and our flags, and we have talked to more people, and we have called, and we have written, and we have signed petitions, and we have done the work. So let me ask you, how many of you in this room have done one thing to support marriage equality? One thing. Okay. How many of you have done two? All right. Many of you have done 1,000 things. Have done 1,000 things. And so much of that came because you chose to become educated. You chose to change your congregation's culture. You welcomed the Welcoming Congregation program. All right, more hands. How many welcoming congregations do we have in the room? Excellent. All right. You might be surprised to learn that of our large congregations, 90, and I just saw myself, it's like looking at yourself in the mirror and see your mother, you know, that over 94% of our large congregations are welcoming congregations. 94%. Over 95% of our mid-sized congregations are welcoming congregations. Our small congregations are also moving forward, and for the first time we have crossed the halfway point. We are 53% of our small congregations. And we are doing some exciting things, I think, in the world of small congregations. For example, the Unitarian Universalist congregations of Mississippi have joined together in a cluster and committed together to do the Welcoming Congregation program. I will be meeting next month with the southern cluster of the Southeast District and the small congregations there in South Carolina and Georgia, some of whom have already become welcoming congregations and others who are on that path. So I encourage you to think about the small congregations you belong to or that you have as neighbors and invite them to participate with you. Invite them to become part of your welcoming congregation program, or if you're a small congregation who is not yet affirmed as a welcoming congregation, to contact other congregations in your area and say, let's do this together. And our office can help you do that, can help you figure out a model that will work. Because it is my personal ambition in this job, just as I set a goal in the Southeast District that 100% of our congregations would be welcoming congregations, and I left too soon to actually realize that goal, but they're still moving. And I'm working on it from this new position. I have that goal for the Unitarian Universalist congregations across the nation. Every congregation 100%. But I can't do that. Only you can. Only you can in your congregation that is not already accredited or affirmed as a welcoming congregation, and those congregations in your district that aren't there. You know, part of our polity as Unitarian Universalist congregations, Denny's going to love this, right? I'm talking about polity. Part of our polity is not just that we get to make our own decisions, you know, like we're an independently owned and operated franchise. That's not what our polity says. If you pull out your hymnal or any place you see our principles and our sources, our covenant, and read that last paragraph, our covenant says that we, the member congregation's covenant, not just to affirm and promote all those things and to honor those sources, but we covenant together to offer each other our mutual trust and support. Our polity says that if a congregation is faltering, is struggling, is not able to do what it needs to do, what it wants to do, what it longs to do by itself, we need to step up as a sister congregation, as a nearby congregation to help. And this is one way that we can help in this effort. We can help our brother, sister, sibling congregations to become welcoming. I use that language very intentionally because brother and sister is such a common term for us to say, right? And we think that we're being very inclusive because we allow the women in. It took us a while to get there. It still doesn't happen everywhere. But now the world continues to change, and it is time to talk about genders beyond male and female. And we'll be having a workshop after this session with that topic, where we talk about an expansive idea of gender identity. And so language like brothers and sisters and sons and daughters is another lesson for us to learn. How do we expand that? To talk about our children and our siblings. To talk about language in a way that includes, always includes one more. That's what we're about. It's always including one more. Who is not in our circle by the language we use, by the things we do, and how do we take it one step further? I'm going to ask a question that may seem off base a little bit. How many of you have done youth work in our congregations? Thank you for that. Thank you for that, because you may not think that a pizza party or a lock-in or maybe even a class or teaching religious education or whatever it is, you may not think that that's changing the world. But we're going to watch a video here for a few minutes, and I decided to allocate the time to do that because I think that there's no better example of how the world is changed through every action, every encounter that we have. And so if we could turn to this.